And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Yes, a great day, despite the fact that for conservatives, for Republicans, for supporters of the MAGA movement, yesterday, the election day, was not full of good news. In fact, it was kind of tough to find good news. Here's one little item, which is that virtually every conservative that I know in the greater Seattle area has supported the incumbent mayor, Mayor Harrell. And again, he's not a Republican, he's not a conservative, but he is a moderate, and he is pro-police and pro-public safety and opposed to homeless camping everywhere. He was considered an underdog, being challenged by somebody on the very extreme left, on the way, way leftward spectrum. And it appears that Mayor Harrell of Seattle has won re-election. He is, with the current most recent counting, he is 8 points ahead. And yes, it's always possible, because votes come in late in the great Northwest, it's possible that he could actually fall behind, but it's unlikely. He is a likely winner, and it is a likely spot of good news. The bad news today is much more serious. The bad news involves a potential pair of civil wars. There are two civil wars that are completely unnecessary, completely destructive, not useful in any sense of the word. And we are about to be plunging headfirst into both of those civil wars. One of them is in Nigeria, which we've talked about before. The president made, the president of the United States, an unbelievably scary, threatening statement last night, which I'll play for you in just a moment. But the other civil war is what people are referring to as a MAGA civil war. It's a question as to whether or not, in order to build some kind of successful movement, conservatives should welcome open anti-Semites, Holocaust deniers, neo-Nazis, Stalin admirers, Hitler fans, whether we should welcome those people as part of a conservative movement, or do what William Buckley did, or do what Ronald Reagan did, or do what basically all conservative heroes would do and have done in the past, which is to say, no, there is no place for Stalin or Hitler fans in a viable conservative movement that is going to come back from the defeats of yesterday and maybe just hold on to the domination of the House and the Senate. And by the way, it would help in holding on to the domination of the House and the Senate if they did something about this asinine government shutdown, which again is useless, non-productive, and just clearly damaging to the country as a whole, and particularly to the Republican Party. I mentioned Nigeria at the beginning of the show, and it's because the President of the United States, yesterday, last night actually, issued a statement that echoed a posting that he had done previously on his Truth Social website. It's a statement about what is going on in Nigeria. And here is what he talks about going into Nigeria, as he said, with guns a-blazing. And they got to have the A in there. Yeah, guns a-blazing.
We're going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about, and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns are blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible, horrible atrocities. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians. These are cherished people. These are great people. Leave them alone. Warning, the Nigerian government better move fast before it's too late. If they don't, there's going to be hell to pay.
Who's going to be paying for that hell? Yeah, yes, Nigeria, but it's also the United States of America. Headline in the New York Times today, U.S. military draws up Nigeria plans. God help us, with limited options to quell violence. American forces are unlikely to be able to end a decades-long insurgency in Africa's most populous country. There are 230 million people who live in Nigeria, despite President Trump's order. And you'll notice that he said he gave the order to not the Department of Defense. Why did he say Department of Defense? That's what it's called. Because he doesn't want to defend anything. There's nothing he's defending here. He's talking about making war. It's War Department. Wasn't he planning to be the peace president? Didn't he want the Nobel Peace Prize? By the way, you can kiss that Nobel Peace Prize goodbye if you send American troops into Nigeria against the wishes of the Nigerian government, which is technically, at least, against the Islamic terrorists that President Trump is condemning. Google puts up news of background that Muslims are attacking Muslims in Nigeria. Wait a minute, I thought it was those Christians that we cherish. No, it's everybody versus everybody in Nigeria. The place is a mess. And the idea that the United States is going to go in there and fix things in Nigeria, didn't we learn some lessons about nation building from some of the costs of Iraq and some of the costs of Afghanistan? This is unbelievable. Muslims are attacking Muslims in Nigeria, terrorist groups and criminal gangs, while also targeting Christians, yes, they do, have killed tens of thousands of their fellow Muslims and attacked Muslim communities and places of worship across northern Nigeria. Cycles of retaliation in central Nigeria, particularly the Middle Belt region. There are frequent clashes between predominantly Muslim herders and largely Christian farming communities over access to land and water. This is like that old Wild West stereotype of the sheep herders versus the farmers, right? That's what they're going through in Nigeria right now, but much more brutally. These conflicts often involve deadly cycles of tit-for-tat attacks, where an attack by one group on the other leads to a retaliatory strike. Just what we want to get involved with, right? Great idea. It is important to note that many analysts suggest that these conflicts are often rooted in ethnic tensions and competition for resources, with religious identity acting as a mobilizing factor rather than purely religious ideology. Both Christians and Muslims have been victims of the various security crises in Nigeria, including violence by criminal gangs who are known as bandits and insurgent groups. The historical riots, Kafach in the 1980s, clashes between Christian and Muslim student groups escalated into citywide riots. A church was burned by Muslim students, and the Christian majority retaliated by burning several mosques and killing 12 people. In Yelwa, Nigeria, in 2004, militiamen from the mainly Christian Tarok ethnic group attacked the town's Muslim community, resulting in an estimated death toll of over 600 people. Kaduna, in 2012, following a suicide bomb attacks on churches by Muslim extremists, scores of Muslims were killed in reprisal attacks by Christians in the state. And finally, Onitsha in 2006, where more than 100 lives were lost. Scary to think that we are about to, quote, go into this situation with guns a-blazing. Why he puts the A in there, I don't know. Maybe it's just a tradition, like him trying to say he's ordered the Department of War to make this move? Well, that's partially because it has nothing to do with defense. We're not defending the United States here. Meanwhile, who's being defended by the civil war in the MAGA movement among conservative institutions and organizations? We'll get to that coming up. And on the Michael Medved Show, talking about the danger of two highly destructive, costly, and completely unnecessary, idiotically conceived civil wars. And one of those civil wars is in Nigeria, where President Trump has said he's ordered this Department of War to be prepared to come into Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa, and a major player within the third world, to go into Nigeria with guns ablazing. That's the words of the President of the United States. What possible benefit can this be for the United States of America? The idea of America First, which was a slogan that President Trump used, I always criticized because of its association with the Nazi apologists and the isolationists in the era of World War II, which, yes, of course, it is still relevant. And, okay, then you have Nigeria. Then you have what people are calling the new civil war in the MAGA movement. There's a headline in the Washington Post, MAGA Civil War. What is that MAGA Civil War? Well, the subheading in the Washington Post says Heritage Foundation in uproar over Kevin Roberts' defense of Tucker Carlson. And then other headlines, fallout intensifies from Tucker Carlson's Nick Fuentes interview. This is all completely unnecessary. And unlike Nigeria, there is a way out for President Trump not to get involved with this destructive civil war on the right. And it can only benefit President Trump and help the Republicans make a comeback after the electoral disasters of yesterday. Okay, there's a piece by James Kirchick, who is a writer and opinion leader. He's the author of a book called The End of Europe, Dictators, Demagogues, and the Coming Dark Age. And James Kirchick writes, the inevitable fracturing of President Donald Trump's MAGA movement is in sight. The instigator of its rupture, that most narcissistic and destructive of all media personalities, Tucker Carlson. Carlson's fascination with conspiracy theories, writes James Kirchick, has ineluctably drawn him toward the most ancient of them all, the perfidious power of the Jews. Among countless other examples of his unhealthy obsession, Carlson has described Ukraine's Jewish president, Volodymyr Zelensky, as rat-like, shifty, and a persecutor of Christians, denounced the farce of Nuremberg, meaning the war crimes trials that, by the way, there's a new movie coming out called Nuremberg that tells you the truth about the war crimes trials after World War II. But to Tucker Carlson, that was a farce. And he has attacked Jewish conservatives for having dual loyalties. His career is an example of the sinister leading the credulous. It was only a matter of time then, writes James Kirchick, that Tucker Carlson would invite Nick Fuentes up to his main cabin home studio for a chummy colloquy last week in which the self-professed Hitler and Stalin admirer, you can hear the audio, by the way, the open point when Stalin's name is mentioned. He says that Stalin is one of his heroes. That was the word from Nick Fuentes. In any event, the self-professed Hitler and Stalin admirer ranted about, quote, neocon Jewish types behind the Iraq War. He talked about organized Jewry. That's Jewry. Has nothing to do with necklaces, by the way, or rings. Zionist Jews controlling the media apparatus. That's a quote. And the historic animosity between the Jewish people and the Europeans. And so the Holocaust was just an expression of that historic animosity, and both sides were responsible. Is that what Nick Fuentes is saying? The furthest Carlson went in rebuking Fuentes was to offer the friendly advice that he refrain from condemning the Jews per se, because going on about the Jews helps the neocons, unquote. Otherwise, the two were simpatico, particularly on the subject of Christian Zionists, who, Carlson said, have been seized by the brain virus. Carlson's jovial exchange with Fuentes naturally stirred controversy, particularly within the conservative movement, which many pro-Israel Christians call home. So intense was the anger that the Heritage Foundation removed Carlson's name from a donation page on its website. The scrubbing must have been unauthorized, however, because the following day, Heritage President Kevin Roberts released a defiant video reaffirming the organization's relationship with Carlson. Quote, Christians can critique the state of Israel without being anti-Semitic, Roberts began, fending off an unmade accusation. Pummeling another straw man, Roberts allowed that while supporting Israel is fine when done in the American interest, quote, conservatives should feel no obligation to reflexively support any foreign government, no matter how loud the pressure becomes from the globalist class or from their mouthpieces in Washington. If there's anyone, writes James Kirchick, conservatives should reflexively support, according to Roberts, it's Tucker Carlson. Quote, we always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. In a speech at Hillsdale College on Monday night, that's this week, Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage Foundation, apologized for the video that he posted as a mistake made with the best of intentions without condemning Carlson outright. Roberts delivered the same equivocating message on Wednesday at a town hall with Heritage staff. Yet Roberts still seems not to understand the elementary distinction between canceling and ostracizing Stalinists and Holocaust deniers like Fuentes are perfectly entitled to spew their nonsense on street corners through self-published manifestos or on online live streams. What they are not entitled to do is to the imprimatur of purportedly respectable institutions like Heritage Foundation, whose reputations hinge upon the voices they choose to amplify. So what else have those voices been saying? They've been attacking Charlie Kirk's memory, for instance. We will get to that. I'm talking now about Nick Fuentes. We'll get to that and more coming up on the MAGA Civil War question mark.
Discover the extraordinary fragrance Ariana Grande REM Cherry Eclipse. Delight in black cherry jubilee, sugared honeysuckle, marshmallow meringue, and glowing amber. Get the perfect fragrance. Ariana Grande's REM Cherry Eclipse, exclusively at Ulta Beauty.
And there are many people in the Heritage Foundation and people who have been very deeply involved in the conservative movement for a long time, like Christopher DeMuth, who just this week resigned from Heritage because of this nonsense of supporting Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson. And yes, it's appropriate to list them together because they were speaking in one voice, congratulating each other, and taking the same anti-Semitic point of view in that now notorious interview that Tucker Carlson chose to offer to Nick Fuentes, Stalin and Hitler admirer. And one of the people at Heritage Foundation that I've known for a long time, he's been a guest on this show on many occasions. His name is Robert Rector. He has been with Heritage Foundation since 1984. Okay, that's easy for me to remember because 1984 is the year before I got married. And we're talking about 40 years with Heritage Foundation. And he has helped Heritage contribute to the successful welfare reform that was one of the good things that happened during the Clinton administration, you may remember. And Robert Rector has been an outstanding writer and researcher about what works in terms of dealing with poverty and what doesn't work. He was at a town meeting that they convened at Heritage, and he was strongly critical, to say the least, Robert Rector, of Kevin Roberts and his extremely ill-considered video defending Tucker Carlson. This is clip 68.
And we have to go back and set the general parameters. You say, oh, we don't cancel. We do cancel. Did we cancel David Duke? Yes. You don't even know who David Duke was, probably most of you. I'd say. Yes. Did we cancel the John Birch Society? Yes. Okay? Because they were harmful, because if they're in your movement, you look like clowns. Tucker's show is like stepping into a lunatic asylum. This is Tucker, Daryl Cooper, Tucker, Nick Fuentes, and we'll talk about he's not having Nick Fuentes online, he's promoting him. So if you have someone inside the conservative movement who literally says that, oh my goodness, Hitler really didn't want World War II. He was kind of a peaceful guy. It was Winston Churchill that caused this whole thing. My God, Eisenhower is a communist, okay? If someone is that nutty, and I know you're too young to care about, I'm a boomer, World War II is a big thing to me, but my God, if you could be that wrong about the World War II, you are wrong about everything on planet Earth.
Okay, and that thing that he mentioned about Eisenhower, it's one of those things that I remember from my early involvement in politics. The John Birch Society, while Eisenhower was still president, so in the 1950s, the John Birch Society condemned the President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, who is now, by the way, I just checked, he is listed on the list of great presidents as the 8th greatest president of them all. He is a great president, not just near great. But he was accused by the John Birch Society and Robert Welch, who was the founder and leader of the John Birch Society, of being a conscientious agent of the international communist conspiracy. Okay? That was the hero of D-Day and the hero of organizing NATO and leading this country in a peaceful way to the containment of communism. And yes, it was ridiculous. And you know who raised a voice against the John Birch Society? Was William F. Buckley. And he made exactly the same point that Robert Rector just made, which is that if you welcome the John Birch Society or people on the extreme crazy right, if you welcome them into your movement, then you're going to look like clowns. It's not going to help. And Robert Rector went on to ask a very direct and tough question to Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation. We'll play the question and Kevin's response. First, the question from Robert Rector, who has been with the Heritage Foundation for more than 40 years. Here's the question.
What is the role of someone who is doing this, who's mainstreaming a neo-Nazi Stalinist online, and who believes that Churchill was the cause of World War II? What role does that person have inside the conservative movement, looking back to what Bill Buckley told us at the very beginning of this movement?
Okay, good question. What is Kevin Roberts' response? And by the way, this also goes to the position of Pat Buchanan in the conservative movement, and to positions of other people. Darryl Cooper, who was one of the guests that Tucker Carlson has welcomed to his show, is somebody who said he doesn't believe that the Nazis actually killed 6 million people. That there were people who died of hunger in the camps, but there was no intentional murder of people in the camps, which is, they have the films, for God's sake. They have literally the best documented crime in human history. But in any event, here is the response by Kevin Roberts of Heritage Foundation, clip 70.
We do what we've always done, which is to confront those noxious ideas. And secondly, to be clear, that Fuentes, people like Fuentes, they aren't conservatives. There's no way that can be construed that way, or at least in a way that's persuasive. But
Okay.
we also, and this is not disputing what you've said, but adding to it a tactical desire, we have to understand that in 2025, that evil person, Fuentes, although I still have hope for his soul, has an audience of several million people. And at least some of that audience might be open to be converted. My video didn't do that, although the intention was to open that idea.
Okay, his video didn't do anything, not what Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan actually came forward and had no tolerance for David Duke. Now, who is David Duke? David Duke was the head of the American Nazi Party. He was very active in the Ku Klux Klan, and he ended up winning a nomination for governor of Louisiana in a primary. And it was up to all basically conservatives to condemn him, even though he was a Republican nominee, because you can't have your party representing someone who was active in the Nazi Party or the Ku Klux Klan. At least I think you can. So why wouldn't President Trump step forward and take a clear position on this brewing civil war and help himself and help the Republican Party? We'll get to that question and more coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, talking about the need for President Trump and other prominent Republican leaders to do what people like Ted Cruz have done, which is to be very, very clear that the Republican Party will not provide a comfortable home for Nazis, for Klansmen, for people who basically do not believe in the principles that have animated the Republican Party since our first Republican president, whose name was Lincoln, right? President Reagan made a general condemnation of racist and hate groups at a part of remarks that he made at an International Association of Chiefs of Police conference in New Orleans on September 28, 1981. That was during his first year as president. In that speech, while not targeting by name members of his own party, he stated, quote, "We have no place in this country for racism, for anti-Semitism, for Nazism. Hand in hand with the criminal aspects of that cult are the sick minds that would recruit young people into murder and violence." And that is such an important statement. One of the things that is become part of a political heritage in this country is the Sister Souljah moment that helped Bill Clinton win the presidency when he won the presidency in 1992. And you may remember that was a complicated race because there was Ross Perot, who was a substantial, successful third-party candidate. He got 18% of the vote. And President Bush, who was the incumbent, who I strongly supported, and then Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton made a point of attacking a rapper who was close to Jesse Jackson, who was considered an important power broker at the time in the Democratic Party. And her name was Sister Souljah. And it was Souljah, Souljah. And she had done a hit song where she called for the killing of cops. And it shouldn't be hard to condemn that. And Bill Clinton did. And he said, when this comes out in pop culture, we have to condemn it. And he did. And it was considered, wow, here he is. He's standing up against people who claim that they are on his side. Why not a Sister Souljah moment for President Trump? By the way, President Trump, please put on the shelf the idea of an invasion of Nigeria. It's not a good idea. It's a disaster. And that's not something we should be looking forward to as part of changing the name and the reputation of our Defense Department into a Department of War, changing it back to a Department of War, which it hasn't been since 1947, which is before I was born. I mean, come on, really. The idea of standing up to toxic voices in your own party. Reagan did it regarding people on the very extreme right that he spoke about in the quote that I just shared with you. And what James Kirchick says is, he says, Carlson and his fellow paleo-conservatives have been explicit in their desire to avenge the honor of Patrick Buchanan, the former pundit and aide to Presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. Buchanan was exiled from the conservative movement over 3 decades ago when William F. Buckley, founder of National Review, accused him of anti-Semitism, and Republican voters rejected his 1992 bid for their party's presidential nomination. You may remember he ran against President Bush, challenged him. President George Herbert Walker Bush. Roberts, that's Kevin Roberts, who is the president of Heritage Foundation, is backing a campaign to persuade Trump to give Pat Buchanan the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Trump has largely embraced Buchanan's trade protectionism and immigration restrictionism, but he has taken a noticeably different approach on Buchanan's third signature issue, foreign policy isolationism. These decisions to embrace Buchanan, there was another writer for National Review who was dropped by William F. Buckley because of anti-Semitism. His name was Joe Sobran. And the idea that you are going to have no enemies on the right, that you're going to look at people and take that position is a disastrous idea. And these decisions collectively constitute a repudiation of Tucker Fuentes and their Buchananite paleoconservative followers. If this crew had its way, Russia would have seized Kyiv years ago, instead of aiding Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado, whom Carlson, again, we're talking Tucker Carlson, assails as the puppet of globo-homo conspiracies. Washington would be backing strongman Nicolas Maduro, whom Tucker Carlson credits for banning gay marriage and sex change operations. Israel, it almost goes without saying, would not only be cut off entirely from U.S. military aid, but probably sanctioned as well. They're talking about embracing a Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes position. And the problem that many isolationists like Carlson and his acolytes have is that when engaging in these debates, they can't help but sink into the anti-Semitic gutter. So writes James Kirchig. For example, on Tuesday, Carlson said Republicans with a neoconservative posture don't care about domestic policy because they don't care about the United States. But they do care about the U.S. Treasury and the Pentagon, the protection of force on behalf of Israel, the projection of force on behalf of Israel. Again, that's in the midst of this debate. If President Trump took a clear position, moving himself away from Holocaust denial and the rest of this, it would be a very positive step for him politically, personally, and ethically, historically, in fact. A New York Times piece today with the headline, Nick Fuentes' rise puts MAGA movement in a time of choosing. And that headline goes to the point that Charlie Kirk, the conservative influencer who was assassinated in December, and Nick Fuentes, the young Hitler-loving white nationalist at the center of a growing schism on the right, were bitter enemies. They were not allies. Fuentes despised Kirk for his support of Israel, and more broadly for his efforts to marginalize Fuentes' gleefully racist and fascist brand of politics. In 2019, seeking to expose Kirk as anti-white and a fake patriot, Fuentes organized his army of young fans known as Groypers after a variant on the alt-right Pepe the Frog meme to flood events held by Kirk's organization Turning Point and to ask hostile questions. At one, they drove Donald Trump Jr. off the stage. After Kirk was murdered, Fuentes, perhaps fearing he'd be blamed, disavowed violence, but he continued his attacks on Turning Point and accused Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, who has been so noble since that death, of course. They accused her of being happy that her husband was killed. I am getting this vibe from her that she's very fake, he said. Okay, we have, as conservatives, generally shunned people who attack Charlie Kirk posthumously. What about Nick Fuentes? He's still attacking Charlie Kirk. And yet we're told that we need to give him a platform and a place of honor. Sorry, it doesn't work. We can do better and must do better for this greatest nation on God's green earth.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.